Can I get a good amen in this house?
It's our sound guys that cut it for us. They make that call.
Do.
Yeah,
they make the
like,
decision.
They make the decision.
Oh,
so then
it's
I'm
above our
like,
pay grade.
All right.
People are in paid to make sure we don't do something but so stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, look at us. I mean, it's pretty likely we're going to do something stupid.
With
we're
a
going to do something
mustache like
stupid.
that.
What?
With a mustache like that, if you don't do something stupid, you're underperforming.
No, this is like my source of power. You know,
It feels like it right now.
You know, Samson had his long hair as a source of
Look at you,
power.
biblical quotes from the beginning.
I really didn't know that it was my source of power until I grew it out, and it's like now I'm bitch wrestling 1,000. Like, how does this even happen? So Morgan keeps wanting to shave it one of these days.
Does she?
Yeah.
It's a bold move to be able to do something the wife doesn't like.
Yeah, it is a bold move.
It's a way to like take the power back just for a couple days. Like I'm not able to keep it for long
term.
I can say, oh, it's Movember, you know, like
Yeah,
I can blame it on things or, you know, something like that. But,
I think it's a brave thing to carry a stash anyway.
Yes.
You know, like a full beard, but then when you go stash,
I can't go stash, but I need the beard to define my jawline. Otherwise, I don't have one at all.
I was wondering, you do have a very defined jawline. It is the beard, though.
It's the beard, man.
It's the male makeup.
It's the male makeup. It's contour for men.
That's amazing.
Well, we're knee deep in this already. So
we are definitely knee deep.
We're joined today by Hunter Harrison,
the one and only.
The one and only. He is here, and we are honored for him to be here. And you have you have dabbled into a lot of really cool things, and so we're gonna dive into that a little bit. But you're in kind of the creative space. So you run a creative agency, correct? And it's called, what's it called?
My agency?
Yeah.
It's called Catch.
Catch, okay,
yeah.
I for some reason, I could only
catchy.
think of the tagline, make it catchy.
Yeah,
so I was
right.
like, what is that?
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug there.
Go to www.
Madebycatch.com.
Look at that synergy already. That's
Right.
perfect. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit, just kind of a little bit of your story, how you got into that space. You've done some work here, consulted for us here at the church, which has been awesome. So we've loved having you around. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about how you got into that space and a little bit of your story to start us off.
How long do we have?
No, as long as you want, bro.
You know what's interesting is I always love to hear how people describe what I do because like it is such an interesting. It's tough for me to describe. Like, honestly, it's like if you're at a party and you're like, hey, what do you do? I'm like, I don't know the answer to that.
I do a lot of things.
I'm a professional daydreamer. Like, what do you even say? You know, so
very similar to what Pastor.
Yeah, that's very true. What pastors do,
right? It's like, people just like want me to daydream, so I write down my thoughts. And,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So most of what I do is centered around creativity. Like, and so when we started Catch. We didn't want to call it a marketing agency because that kind of puts us in a box. And I've got like a really diverse background. I've done several things. I've retired from things. And so like, you know, this
Come
not
back
many
to
people.
things that you retired from.
Right. It's like not many people will say, oh, I'm retired. But now like I have a new career. I've reinvented myself a couple times. But with Catch specifically, it's like what can I do to take a very unique skill set that I've acquired based on experience to then translate it into a business that allows others to excel. And so like that's really my vision for Catch long term is certainly to add or multiply value in other people. You know what I mean? So it's like how can I take what I've done and the experience that I've acquired to then like pass that on to others. And so so we call it a creative agency because like that allows us to do more than just marketing, but like to the average person, we're a marketing agency. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you do like marketing related tasks, but we can take things that go outside of the sandbox of marketing and say, okay, what are you doing here for this very specific thing? So it definitely has a lot of moving parts and moving pieces, and I'm still figuring it out, you know.
And then you've got people all over America, right? And really the world, clients all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, and this is actually my second agency. I did a social media content agency years ago that I exited from, like sold off to a technology company. But that was like worldwide, like major brands, major influencers that was in a space that I was new to, didn't really understand, but just was it was definitely like a lightning in a bottle moment for me. But yeah, for us, like it's weird. We found this really unique niche with influencers and like bold brands. Like that's sort of who we appeal to. So we've worked with some pretty decent sized influencers, and definitely the brands that we work with are willing to do like bold things. And some of them are local, some of them are worldwide. Like I mean, we can be as small or as big as we need to be based on what the request is. So.
That's awesome, man. And you got designers all over the place too, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Or creative people that
creative
you networked
people
with. I mean, all over.
Right. When we were set out to build Catch, like I'd worked for a couple agencies and started another agency. So like this being my second one, I was like, if you go out and you hire a graphic designer, you're really boxed into whatever their skill set is. And so like everything that your agency pumps out is really limited to what they are able to produce. Like that's just an example. Like you could apply that to web or app development or whatever, you know. And so for us, it's like if we can scale up or scale down based on the project and get really specific talent for a very specific need, then I feel like we do the best work. So we're kind of an agency without walls in that regard, where it's like, okay, if you come to me, like even if we had a designer on staff, but your request is different than what their skill set is, then I can go out and just find the talent that I need for that. And it's just networks that I've built over the years and rapport I've built working with people and trust I've built. It's like, I know this person can execute on this task and do really good work, whereas like somebody on staff that we have may not be able to do. They'll do good work, but it won't be exactly tailor fit to what your need is. So
what's so how did you get into the creative space? Is it something that you wanted to do forever, or is it something that was kind of more natural that you kind of like just followed a lead and got into it, or how was that? Because I remember the first time I saw something, you know, that I just saw you on like social media or something, was actually the y'all did a music video for Smash Waffles, which you own Smash Waffles as well too. So that was the first time. I saw Hunter. I was like, dude, this is awesome. And y'all did it.
So
was
funny.
it like the Beastie Boys or something?
It was like
phenomenal.
the Doughboys.
The Doughboys. That's right.
Justin Cox. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, Smash is a wild story. I mean, you know, I don't know if we have time to even get to that, but like Justin and I exited from Smash, which essentially we sold majority share. I mean, there's a lot of ins and outs to that, but then when we did that, we got back involved, and so we wanted to do some sort of like funny announcement that we were back involved. And I was like, what if we like wrote sort of like a Beastie Boys rap and recorded it and made like a music video? That's so funny.
It was phenomenal. Yeah, dude. I remember because I remember eating Smash Waffles, which by the way is phenomenal. I love Smash Waffles. And I remember because I just moved to Greenville, and that was the place I would take like anybody that visited, because it was such a unique thing.
You gotta tell a story. Tell a story about Smash Waffles, because this is a whole. This is a whole nother track. But the Smash Waffles story. Tell the story, because this is really a cool story.
Well, what's so funny to me is like just sitting across from Aaron, because Aaron knows everything about me. I feel like we go way back.
We go like what? How long have I known you? I'm 44. You're about what? How old are you?
At least half my life.
I'm
just turned 40.
Yeah. So like, I mean, literally 20 years. We've known each other at least 20.
Yeah,
probably more than that.
For a long time. Like I remember you were at Lanier's like first birthday party.
That's
like
exactly
we go
right.
back and see pictures. I'm like, oh man, it's crazy. But and he's 14 now. But you and I haven't known each other long, so I may reveal things. You're like, man, I never knew this. But yeah, Smash is an interesting story, because I started an agency, sold my agency, was traveling the world, and really felt the need to get back local. And so I remember in a prior life, I was a banker. So I was in banking for 12 years, and Justin Cox was also in banking. And so him and I would meet on occasion just to share like banking stories. You know, it's like banking friends. Let's just complain.
Just
about
really
the nature of the
banking.
industry.
Yeah.
And so we would just kind of get together on occasion. And I remember very specifically one night we got together at a local coffee shop. It's actually not a local coffee shop, but like it was a Starbucks. I'm like, I don't want to say that we came up with Smash at a Starbucks, but it was at a Starbucks we met, and we were talking about a banking app because I had developed a couple of apps, one that like did okay. And so I really had the itch to do a new app, and I had an idea for a banking app, and I was like, man, I've been outside of the banking space for too long. Like I really need to catch up with somebody that is in it and can give me like really good, just insight into what's going on in the banking industry at the time. And so I called Justin. I was like, hey man, I got an idea for an app. I'd love to pick your brain on the current banking environment just to see if it would work. And so we probably spent 45 minutes talking about this app. And then I was wrapping up the conversation, and somehow we got on the topic of cooking, and I didn't realize that Justin loves to cook. He loves to cook, and I rave about. He's actually like
he's a very good.
He's
cook.
Very good. Like he's underrated. People should.
He should think about opening.
Something.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, such an underrated cook, but I didn't know this about him, and I've known him for so long, and so it was like, no way, dude. Like this is crazy. I've always wanted to do some take on a restaurant because like. I'm kind of a risk junkie. Like people may or may not know this about me, but like
You're a adrenaline junkie a little bit.
Like I love somebody saying, "Hey, the odds are against you." It's like, "Oh, are they? Okay,
all right.
Let's take this on."
And you like
never
to try
tell me
out new stuff. Like you like to not. I mean, you went from banking to Vine videos. I mean, and a lot of people don't even know what
Vine is, right?
Vine is. It does. I don't even know. Does it exist still?
Nah.
Yeah,
R.I.P. Yeah,
that's
R.I.P.
Right. So, but I mean, you jumped into that. Then you go into cooking and restaurants, and I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting background for sure. But anyway, so we're just sitting talking. I found out that he loved to cook. That was like a passion of his. We talked about like restaurants in general and how difficult they were. Like I think something like 90% of restaurants fail in their first year. Like the odds are terrible, and so we were like, well, why did they fail? What did they do wrong? And so like I'm a big why person. Like, and this is one thing you'll know within 10 minutes of having a conversation with me. I will drill so deep into the why of like why you're doing stuff. And people are like, oh man, this is so existential. Like, why are we even having this conversation? Like I'll do it with strangers. It's very interesting. But I ask why a lot. So I'm like, why do restaurants fail? What did they do wrong? What do they do right? And so we just started like having these conversations. And like you said, I'm a big test person. Like I'm very much into, if I have an idea, let's test it. The market will tell us. If it becomes too hard, too fast, I don't like it. Like I'm like, and I think that speaks a lot to, right place, right time, favor of God, like whatever you want to call it. But I think that like there are ways for things to be easy, and when it is easy, it feels right. When it's hard, there's something that doesn't feel right about it.
Something that's clicking right.
Right. And so like that doesn't mean that you don't have to work for things in life. Like I believe in that, but I also believe that God will open doors when doors are supposed to be open, and sometimes if doors shut, it's like stop knocking, just go to like another
next door.
Open door.
That's right.
And so so anyway, so Justin and I were talking. We talked about restaurants. We talked about cooking. We started talking about biscuits. We're like, everybody's doing biscuits. What is something that nobody's doing?
Bojangles is doing a lot of biscuits.
They do.
They do delicious biscuits.
Delicious biscuits.
So we landed on waffles. It's like nobody's really doing waffles. Waffle House does them. A very specific waffle. And, everybody else does pancakes. So, like, what if we did waffles? What would that look like? And so we started down that path. And our low-risk philosophy was, instead of going and pouring all this money into a restaurant that we haven't proven on a recipe concept that we didn't know if people even liked, what if we did delivery first and tested it out and just to see what would happen? And it was around this time, actually. I think it was like December of 2017. So it was around Christmas time, and I told Justin, I said, you go work on a recipe, I'll work on the branding, the logo, the website, and then we'll come back and see what we got. And so he did that. He worked on some recipes. We got that perfected, got the brand established, and we made up some waffles, threw them in Christmas boxes, like T-shirt boxes.
Yeah.
And I ordered some stickers off of Sticker Mule
Boom.
and slapped them on the top of the boxes. And we went and dropped them off at like just area businesses. And yeah, it was
And the
crazy.
rest was crazy.
The rest was history. I mean, like we literally we were doing all this in his like personal kitchen at his house, like just to see. And like I was like, I don't know, man, maybe like we'll get a couple orders. And we got like an influx of orders day one, so we had to shut the site down. We are like, oh man, we gotta find somewhere like legitimate to do this. We can't do this in your kitchen, you know. So we it was funny. The market told us that this is something that they wanted and something that they were willing to pay money for. And so that was like the confirmation that I needed to like feel like, okay, this is actually a really interesting concept. But yeah, I'd sold my agency to this company in Houston, and I was, man, I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking.
No, you're doing
that's the point.
That's why you're here.
here.
I had sold my agency to a company in Houston, and so I was still working for that company. Like that was part of the deal. Was like I had like a golden handcuffs agreement where I sold it to them, but still managed that wing of their business. And I just like we did this, and it just felt right. So I was like, I think I need to kind of go pursue this
Go
path.
make some waffles.
Yeah, which is so weird. I remember having a conversation with a guy at the agency. It's like, hey, you know,
I'm all in.
I'm all in on waffles. And even conversation with Morgan, she was like, this is crazy. Like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, we went all in on waffles, and within, you know, probably 9 months we had a cafe, and then we had a couple cafes. And so that's been a whole
Journey.
That would be a podcast in itself, just
Yeah.
talking about Smash. That business specifically taught me more about business than any other thing that I've
Good
done.
and bad.
Yeah, good and bad. Like
Yeah.
I've been through the valleys with that business. I've been through the mountaintops, and it's been really interesting. But it's back on a good path. Like it saw
Are
some
you
really
still involved
dark.
in it?
Yeah, so I'm still involved. Justin's
out, yeah.
He's pretty much out. He still owns like a small percentage of
Yeah.
like corporate. And so we've got the local cafe. We've got two other cafes, one in Durham and one in Pittsburgh. The guy that Justin sold out to is based in Pittsburgh, so he's a restaurant guy, wants to take it all over the place. So but yeah, I'm still pretty heavily involved in it. Not on a day-to-day basis, but certainly as like a major shareholder. And
y'all have redone that business multiple times now. I mean, the basic concept has stayed the same, but I mean, there's been a lot of
the structure's changed,
retooling and structure and all
the
that.
scale of it has changed. It's like, what is it? How do we want to scale it?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a whirlwind for sure.
Do y'all still deliver?
Yeah, still deliver. And that was one thing. Like I remember people thinking I was crazy. I was like, no.
Well, when you did that, you were.
Yeah, like
I mean,
I was like,
totally
the future of food is delivery. I remember saying
Yeah.
that phrase so many times, and people were like, no, I don't really get that. Like,
And
you
now-
get pizza delivered, that's all you get delivered.
yeah.
And now,
Well, after
like,
COVID changed everything. COVID
Right.
changed the restaurant business forever.
yeah.
Forever.
And before we started, there was no Uber Eats in our market, no Grubhub,
Yep.
like none of these delivery services. And so, like at the time, it was pretty unique and progressive. It was like, oh,
And you
waffles
had to hire
delivered?
people to deliver.
Yeah.
That was
and I had to deliver.
Yeah,
like
you were delivering
yeah.
this stuff. It wasn't.
I remember
hey,
my kids just being asleep in the back seat as I'm like running waffles around town. It's
Yeah.
like, Lakely was in school here, and I remember showing up to her kindergarten class, I think, as a waffle delivery driver. Like, imagine, like, that is not
this
a
is my dad.
glamorous.
Hey, this is my dad.
Right, that's not a glamorous profession to say, oh, I'm like a waffle
No.
delivery driver. But the faces that the kids made when I walked through the door were like, ah, man, this is like all the validation.
Yeah. Well, for a
mean-
kindergartner, if your dad's delivering waffles,
Right?
that's kind of like Santa Claus.
Yeah.
I mean,
People
that's
who
like-
still come from out of town to like speak at Open Door or be here, they always ask about smash waffles.
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they still do. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's because it's such a very unique.
It's a novel product.
It's a novel product, man, and it's not something you can get everywhere, and it's
Yeah.
not something that even if you can get it everywhere, you want everywhere. So I mean,
Right.
it really is. But I mean, it was a great tasting product, and the branding was amazing.
Yeah.
You know,
thank you.
and so there's that place of like, well, those two things coming together make a big deal. And
Right.
you can get a cookie anywhere.
Right.
You can't get
Right.
a waffle.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's a really big
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle. And it's a great nighttime snack. that's the other reality. Is like a lot of people would think all waffles in the morning, but for a college town, waffles at night.
Yeah.
That's you can't beat that.
No, well, and the interesting thing about them is they're dough based, and so
Yeah.
like people don't necessarily know the science of it, but it's like most waffles are batter, and,
Yeah.
and we're dough based, so it's like a donut or a bagel. Like
Right.
you can
Yeah.
pretty much make it what you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, fun business for
Yeah.
sure.
So then from there, in that world is when Catch started.
Yeah,
Around there.
so I think I know the dates by memory pretty good. I think it was like May of 2018. We had a restaurant group come in and buy a majority share of Smash, and so I was at a point where it was like, what do I do?
What do I do
like
next?
yeah, I'm at a new stage in my life, and I've got this weird. I feel like I can do just about anything, and I've been proven wrong in this, but like that's my attitude. It's like, oh, I can do that. You know what I mean? Except for dance, I can't dance. Like I figured that out. It's like I'm just.
Well, I'm glad you know your limitations.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
gotta
it's
know.
like this
We
very
all have
like
something.
self-awareness is
All
key in all this.
superpowers exist until
Right.
the dance floor.
But like most of the time I'm like, can't be that hard, right? Like whatever it is. And so anyway, so I was faced with this, like, the world is my oyster, what do I do? And I'd already done the agency thing, so it was just kind of in my blood. That's sort of what people knew me as is like a creative guy. And so I was like, well, I could start another agency. That's very easy for me, very low risk, low startup cost. And so, yeah, so I started Catch in 2018 after we got out of Smash. Little did I know, in December of 2018, they'd come back and say, hey, we need you back
We want you
involved in
back.
Smash. So it was like, I also started, I partnered with a local real estate agent
Yep.
here and started a real estate agency. And so those two businesses, I was like, okay, I have free time. This is what I'm going to do. I had no idea Smash was going to like fall back in our laps. And so people were like, why do you do so much? And it's like, well, none of it was intentional. It
Wasn't the
kinda
plan.
On
Like,
top of your incredible wife, now being the owner of a hair salon, so I mean she does all that too. So you aren't busy at all.
No.
no, not at all.
Raising two teenagers, so-
Right. I know. So yeah, my wife is a hairstylist. She's been a hairstylist for
Forever.
20 years
Yeah,
at
yeah.
least. And what's crazy about it is like people associate me with being an entrepreneur when in reality she was the first entrepreneur of our family
Yeah.
because she went to hair school and she's been self-employed from the beginning. And
Yeah.
so like I always try to like reflect credit onto her because
Yeah.
it's like, hey, no, she was the first
She kinda paved
entrepreneur
the way there.
of our
Yeah.
family. People don't necessarily associate being a hairstylist as being an entrepreneur, but she's been running her own business and
100%.
Yeah.
doing so at like an excellent level for 20 years.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, her parents own the salon that she worked at for many years, and they came to her at the first of the year and were like, hey, we think it's time to kind of retire and move on to the next stage. And so we bought the salon from them at the first of the year. So now she's like full scale
She's
salon
running it.
owner.
Yeah.
And she's good, man.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She's a great leader. I mean, like that's one thing that for somebody that is new to that environment, like it's very natural for her.
That's awesome.
So yeah, we're pretty busy.
Yeah,
Busy.
just a tidge.
But
Just a
she
little
thought
bit.
she was like, man, this is so hard. I'm like, you got this. This is
Yeah,
like, I got you.
Don't tell me the odds. We got it.
Right,
do
yeah, we
anything.
got it.
He can do everything.
Optimism, man.
Well, where does your tell me a little bit about your faith and your testimony and how that has intertwined? You mentioned a little bit how kind of you're following open doors. God opens doors, you run into it. What's a little bit of your testimony in all of this? Because obviously, you've been involved here at church. You've helped us out. Your kids, I know your kids in youth group and do all that kind of stuff. So you got a great family. So just tell us a little bit of that side of it.
Just before you get into that, I would just say, because I want you to get into that, but one of the things for all the church leaders out there that listen, when he said like he has a tendency to ask why, that's been one of his greatest or our greatest benefits for having Hunter here.
Definitely,
is that he is always asking the why. And I think that's a huge benefit to have somebody like that who will always question the status quo. And Hunter's excellent at that without not being condemning or like aggressive about it, but he's always like, hey, why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we doing it this way? Is there a better way?
Yeah.
Well, I'm
so-
genuinely curious. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
some
Yeah.
people ask why, because they have an agenda behind it, and it's like, no,
And
I'm
we all know those
genuinely-
people. Me and you know exactly who those
Yeah,
people are, you know, and they're
yeah.
always looking.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, my testimony is pretty anticlimactic. Like I grew up in '90s Christianity, so like
Oh,
Aaron knows
yeah.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
like
man.
you know,
DC
we were
talk.
'90s Christians. I wasn't allowed to do anything.
He-Man was of the devil.
Yeah, He-Man, Ninja Turtles. Like all I wanted to do as like a '90s kid was watch Ninja Turtles, but like I couldn't
No,
because
you
mind
couldn't.
over matter.
No,
like you
absolutely.
can't be watching that film.
No, there's
They got bad
satanic
attitudes
issues.
up
in there.
I couldn't even watch freaking Care Bears.
no, I mean,
No,
like,
seriously.
Did you want to watch Care Bears?
Well,
he wanted
first
to
off,
because he
Jake,
couldn't.
drink a
you know?
glass of Hush. Smurfs. I couldn't watch Smurfs either.
Yeah,
Could you watch Smurfs? I
no,
couldn't watch
could-
He-Man, Smurfs, any of that stuff.
Well, it was,
Heck yeah.
it's weird. I don't know when the transition happened, but I
Yeah.
remember being able to watch those things. And then I remember my mom going to maybe some church service. And then like all of a sudden it was like, you can't watch any of this stuff.
done.
It's
We're
like,
going back. We've gone back. We got to stand first.
right. This is all evil. So yeah, I mean, I've grown up in church my entire life. And, you know, that's part of the reason why him and I go way back, went to Christian school. I am part of, so it was just me and my mom growing up. So like I was like very small, tight knit family, grew up without a dad. And so like she and I had like this very like tight core. And what's interesting to me is so she put me through Christian school. So I was in Christian school
Yeah.
for like kindergarten to 6th grade, and then she retired from Burr's Welcome. Do you remember Burr's Welcome?
Absolutely,
like
man,
it's
for sure.
DSM now. I don't even know what it
that's
is.
right, or whatever it is this week.
Yeah, it keeps changing. But I remember, so she retired when I was in 7th grade, and she came to me one day and she was like, I'm gonna pull you out of school. I'm gonna homeschool you. And I was like furious because I was like, I don't want to be homeschooled.
Nobody
All my
wanted to be homeschooled back then.
Yeah, I mean, nobody. You were homeschooled.
I was
You
homeschooled,
get it.
and
you know
I
what I'm
still
talking
didn't want to
about.
be homeschooled back then.
Nobody wanted it.
It wasn't
because
cool back then because it was a lonely place, man.
It
Back
was-
then.
very lonely. Most of the homeschool kids were pretty socially awkward, and it's like
Yeah.
I don't want to be a part of that stigma. And so like I remember being so resentful towards her about that for the longest time. And then my mom passed away at like a young age, and so it's so funny how like time changes your perspective on things, because like I was resentful very early on in that, but then when you look back on that, you're like, man,
Yeah.
I had so much time with her,
Yeah.
and that
So
was like
good.
so valuable for me because, and I didn't know it at the time. Like, you know, it's funny how you walk through
Yeah.
things and you don't realize it, and then you look back and you're like, man, I should have cherished that a little
Yeah.
bit more. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of my testimony, man. It's pretty boring. Like I've been in church my whole life, never really had a prodigal son moment. And, you know, just been that, you know, that
Yeah.
Christian person. I was a pretty good kid.
Yeah.
Always been like pretty in line with
Given
that,
and
but-
where you, I mean, we've talked about this at times, but I mean, and I don't think I would call it ever a crisis of faith, but there's definitely been times that you've questioned what you grew up in.
yeah.
You know, so can you talk through that a little bit? Because you have, I mean, you know, me and you grew up in the 90s. I mean, we grew up in the same youth group, you know, and experienced a lot of great things,
Right.
but also kind of came out of that with this emotional view of church,
Yeah.
you know, that maybe at times wasn't very grounded, or it felt like, you know, and in truth, a lot of the people that we knew in that youth group or in that time don't really follow Jesus as much anymore. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So how have you journeyed through all that, seeing all the shifts and changes in church, seeing all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, I'm such a why person. Like, I ask really uncomfortable questions, but
Yeah.
it's not like my core has always been unwavering. Like, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that that's like the key to all this is like realizing like I know who God is, and I am in tune with the frequency of Him. Like, that's
Your core convictions have never changed.
right, and that's like I try to explain this to people sometimes. Like, it's almost like a radio dial, like where you can be out of tune with God or you can be in tune with God, and we go through these moments where we're out of tune, and you just hear a lot of static, and you're like, God, where are you? And then you have these times where you're like, man, I hear him so clear, but I see him in areas that I didn't expect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, like I remember having these like core belief systems based on things that I was fed as a kid.
Yeah.
And then when I got to the point where I needed to make it my own, as you're like growing, as like a human, you're like, hey, why do I believe this?
Yeah.
What about this is right? What about this is maybe just based in the best of what we understood of God at the time. You know what I mean? And I feel like, you know, if you look at the history of Christianity, it's like we are on this path to trying to understand God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like you can look back in the Bible at people, it's like, oh, they're just trying to understand who he is. And sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong. But at the end of the day, if you're just trying to understand who he is to you, I think you're on the right path. You know? So, but yeah, I remember, I think that because of the system that I grew up in, it gave me a really like weird guilt complex because I felt like very like works based. And like, you know, and you're familiar with that. I'm sure. It's like it was always about reputation or what you're doing or what you're not doing. Like even to the point, like I remember when Morgan and I first started dating, we would walk into like retail stores and she'd like do things that made it look like she'd just be like close to me with something in her hand, and I'm like, hey, we need to make sure nobody thinks we're stealing this. You know what I mean? Like it was this like weird like guilt, like everybody, there's always people watching. And so I think that there's something in that I had to sort of escape from. It's like, you know, it is a very judgmental view of how Christians have been over the years, and it's like, you know, and it's very real. I mean, you know, I grew up, I remember being like
it's
that.
not a perception, it's a reality.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what's difficult about it.
Yeah. So I think that like there's a lot of things that you have to walk out as an individual. It's like, okay, what of this was fed to me and I just believed it based on like who was telling me, and what do I need to like actually hear directly from God himself, and like have like a really core belief in it. And so yeah, I'm still walking through that. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, I think it's one of the most interesting things, because we grew up a highly charismatic church. I mean, the places, I mean, Open Door, and then you went to Faith and Victory for a long time, and I went to youth group at Faith and Victory, and loved people there and still do. But it was very interesting to me because, you know, a lot of people in charismatic, non-denominational church, they kind of view the Baptist denomination, some of the schools that we grew up in, as very legalistic and things like that. But it's funny that for my life, I still feel like I'm breaking free of legalism,
right?
Especially that works-based mentality. So I think works-based thought process actually is not necessarily connected to any denomination. I think it's a lot more connected to the world we live in, and just how culture is around us at many times, and really us feeling the need to perform.
Right.
Which I would say, you know, it's really probably a deep thought to go into. So much of what we have around us today is continuing to play that out in our minds, from social media to pretty much everything around us. It's just like we have to perform to be accepted. And so it's just very counterintuitive to be accepted first by God and not accepted based on our performance. I just think it has to get worked out of all of us in a real way. And we have to, I mean, that's the deep work. Like you said, knowing God. I mean, do we really know about him? Do we know him? Do we actually, or do we just know a religious part of that?
Right.
That has many times been misconstrues who he is and what he's about. And I just, even as a pastor today, I mean, even in how I speak and things like that, I go back and I listen to myself a lot, and I'm like, man, that's still there in me. You know, it's still that tendency, even in our thought processes and the way we think. It's just, it's a really dangerous trap, and it's hard to break free of, very much.
Well, it's very like the Christianity I grew up in was very self-serving. Like you're right, it is about like performance, but it's also like you perform because like you're trying to earn your jewel in heaven. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I don't think that's what it's about, but you know what I mean? But like that's sort of the picture that was painted. And so, yeah, some of it is like, I think you've been pre-programmed because it has been a part of who I've been since the beginning. So I have like these pre-programmed responses, and what I've started to realize recently is like my first reaction is not always my best reaction. So it's like if my first reaction is like this, it's like, okay, but why is that my reaction, and is it true to who like God is? And I say this a lot too, like I am fascinated by the stories of Jesus. Like that is always my go-to with like analyzing anything biblically, is like, what did Jesus do and what did he model? Because
That's
like
right.
even like I say for suffering specifically, like sometimes people are like, oh well, we're meant to suffer, like I remember like that being like a key. It's like,
huge.
oh well, you're gonna be persecuted, you're gonna be this, and it's like you always see Jesus, like anytime people had a belief system and faith in him to do something, he was somebody that would relieve the suffering. You know what I mean? Like he would always make things better. And so I think that like if you go and you look at those core stories and you're like, okay, how does this apply now? That's always sort of my go-to.
That's awesome, man. It's good.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, man, what's you're one of those guys who are typically ahead of the curve with a lot of the ways you're thinking. Probably because you're just asking the questions, right? Asking why and all those things. What are you seeing, man? What are you seeing that's next? And we talked about food delivery service is the big thing. Before, you were a little bit ahead of the game. We were talking about podcast itself. So what are you feeling in culture or in business, or what's happening? What's out there?
Yeah. I'm obsessed with what's next. I'm always like, that's sort of my makeup. Like I'm always just forecasting, trying to figure it. And I'm right sometimes and I'm wrong sometimes. And that's sort of what I do on a daily basis. Is I try to like analyze trends and figure out, okay, what is like something that's like progressive or something that's coming on the scene so that we can ride the swell. And because there are people that see the swell and okay, let me get my board and let's ride it. Or there's also people that swim against the current and they don't want to embrace it. And so like so much of my life is like, all right, let's embrace it. Like what's coming? Let's get our board and let's ride. And so I'm a big believer in AI. I'm also really scared of it. I'm very nice to it anytime I use it, because it's like
you don't want to talk bad to it.
No, it's like use your manners. Make sure.
Yes.
Say please and thank you.
AI is listening. So.
Very complimentary. AI is listening. But yeah, I've been on that train for probably 2 years now, and it's coming whether we like it or not.
Yeah, there's no stopping it.
There's no stopping it, and we can sit there and try to ignore it or try to pretend like it's not there. But the reality is we are already basically cyborgs. Like nobody really thinks that, but it's because like it's just we are slowly conditioned to do things as humans over time. But if you look at people standing in line waiting for something, 9 times out of 10 we're on our cell phone. Like we don't go anywhere without it. Like we've already fully embraced this mentality that we need technology to survive, just a day-to-day
whatever we're eating is feeding us, and we're eating at that trough.
We're eating at it like a crazy pace.
Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah, and so like I think that like if you look at technology over time, it's like I remember fax machines being like voodoo. It's like, hey, I can like send this, and it appears over there, and like, how does that even work? Like there. Yeah. And now it's like everything's at our fingertips. So, I think AI is the most interesting new development of our generation, and I've fully embraced it. I've tried to figure out the best ways to utilize it in our work environment and to do it ethically. I've even talked to like teachers at my kids' school now about like how they need to have policies in place. Like companies need to have AI policies on how to use it ethically, because there are risks at play and people are going to use it, and
it's going to be very unethical.
It's going to be like, if you don't get a handle on it really quick, it's going to get out of hand. But yeah, I'm anything I'm at the point where I'm creating my own GPTs, like to do like very specific tasks. And it's not there yet. Like if you, I did a brand builder the other day. So it's just a brand builder GPT where you type in, you're like, hey, I want to start a business that does this, or I have this business and I want it to do this. And it will create a logo and a brand for you. And it is really close to being like very,
Spot
very
on.
good.
Yeah.
It's not there yet, but it is so close that like the pace that it's moving at, it'll be there within 12 months. And so if I don't embrace it,
You're going to get
then
outdone. You're going to go.
yeah.
You're going to run out of a job.
Right, right. And so like, and people are scared of it, and I understand that, but like, it's also like not fully embracing the calculator. Like calculators are like a very early version of AI. It's like, okay, I'm getting a computer to solve a problem for me that I could do on a sheet of paper. And it's just like progressed so fast, to the point where it will do so much for us. And, it's interesting.
Fascinating too when you talk about AI, because I understand people not wanting to embrace it. I get it, but the problem that you have is the biggest companies in the world, not in America, are embracing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and they're the ones peddling it. So
Yeah.
you got, the Bezos, the Apples, you got Microsoft.
Yeah.
You got these companies that are literally creating the technology that you hold and eat from every day.
Right.
And they're embracing it at a pace that you can't even keep up with, and neither can the government. So
Right.
it's not, when you start talking about companies like that, it's just at a higher level of what's getting infiltrated into our culture all the time that we're not in control over.
Yeah. Well, and it's happening so fast that like, it's funny for me, it is so obvious because like that's sort of what I do is like I see these things and I pay attention to them. But for the average person, they don't necessarily see it. And I have conversations with people a lot, and they bring it up, and they're like, yeah, they don't fully embrace it. But most of the time, they don't fully embrace it because it's like a fear-based response.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I've learned in life. Is like, if anything's fear-based, it's probably not good. You know what I mean? So
It's
like,
not a good reason.
No, it's never a good reason. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to change the entire outlook of how just day-to-day work is done.
Yeah.
And it'll take 3 to 4 or 5 years to really like fully be integrated into.
But that's the pace we're on, 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
It's not like 20
easily.
years away. 3 or 4 or
Right.
5 years. I mean, how fast is all this just doubling in knowledge and understanding? I mean, it is flying right now out of space.
And it doesn't sleep. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So
I was thinking about, I had my phone updated the other day, like an app update, and the amount of AI that's just going into that just one update. I was like, my God, the way the phone's thinking now is just bonkers. I was like, holy cow. So it's crazy.
It's wild. Well, that'll be fun.
yeah.
Maybe next time we'll just have AI.
So
Hunter
should we just
Harrison,
watch Terminator? Just see what it's like.
I mean,
Let's remind ourselves. No, I'm just kidding. That's
Right?
terrible. Don't do that, parents.
Well, it's rooted in some version of truth. It's kind of like
Yeah.
Back to the Future. Back to the Future is
Well,
my favorite movie. Like the future of
That's
Back
a
to
better
the Future.
movie to watch than Terminator. The pastor threw out
Yes.
Terminator. You threw out Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Well,
I'm
y'all
more
couldn't-
Christian
You
than you. Can
homeschooled
you believe
kids.
that?
Yeah, exactly.
Y'all couldn't watch either one of them, so I don't know what it matter.
I couldn't watch either one.
You're like sneaking in the bedroom. It's like, oh man, Marty McFly. Let me
It's
check
Marty
this out.
McFly. He's sarcastic, Aaron. You can't watch
He
him.
used the cuss word.
No,
Come on,
PG. It's like G now, bro.
Right. It's so funny.
Well, man, thanks for so much for being on, man. We recorded this the day before Thanksgiving, so
I know, man.
we got
Thank
Hunter
you,
to come
bro.
in, and that's
Yeah.
Appreciate you
means a
being a
lot.
part,
Appreciate
man.
that,
I love you,
Of course.
brother.
Yeah,
Appreciate
we,
you.
We,
letting me know,
and
man.
I will say this too. So I think sometimes in the church world too, when we think about serving in church, we have like our dream team and all of those things, which I was amazing, right? I don't want to belittle that, but then there's some people who do so much, and it almost exists outside of the dream team. And so you're a vital part to our church and to our staff as well, just through some of the stuff you do. But really, just you using your mind, your talents that God has given you to really help.
Oh man,
Even us in the church
made us
and
so
do
much
some other
better.
things.
Just
So,
different things. It's amazing. So
Yeah.
very grateful
Oh,
for you.
y'all got a great team. I just kind of asked a few questions. That's all. Just asked a few
Okay.
whys. That was it.
That's it, man. Somebody's got to, though.
Yeah.
So.
That's right, man.
We appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey,
Yeah, of course.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank y'all.
brother.
Love y'all.
Love you, man.